How's it going, guys? I'm back with a little bit of a different thing. It's not going to be a podcast this time. It's going to be a tier list of my rankings of the NFL teams. It's again not a podcast, which is going to be a little bit different, but I feel like this is going to be kind of easier and maybe more fun for me to do than just talking to a camera the whole time. Uh, so we're just going to jump right into it. So we'll start from the top and work our way down. So we're going to start with the Super Bowl contenders, so we have easy ones for that, like Chiefs. Obviously, don't really have to go in depth about that. Pat Mahomes, best quarterback, best player in the NFL, in my opinion. Um, if you have him, you're going to be a Super Bowl contender, in my opinion. And they also have debatably the best tight end, one of the best receiving cores. I really like Edwards-Helaire from LSU at running back. Their defense still has a few question marks, but I feel like they're just basically the same team as last year, and I think they'll do just as well. So I would not be shocked to see them go back to back. Along with the other Super Bowl team from last year is the 49ers, and we'll move them up to Super Bowl contenders as well. The defense has no holes, except maybe at secondary they could be a little bit better, but that defensive line is probably the best in the league without any question. I do think Nick Bosa is a little too hyped, but there's no denying that he's a top player at his position. The offense, Deebo Samuel is going to miss the start of the season. I don't know exactly how many weeks, but he'll be back in time for them to make the push because I don't think he's that they rely on him that much for the offense to get moving. They still have one of the best running games in the league, and I think Garoppolo, he had a bad Super Bowl, but I think he's a top 15 quarterback, and I think they can win a Super Bowl with that. Last year's MVP, I don't think he'll win MVP this year. I think that'll be Mahomes, but Lamar Jackson. I think the Ravens are probably the most all around put together teams because the Chiefs have a really good offense. Their defense is kind of questionable. The 49ers have a really good defense. Their offense can be questionable, but the Ravens have one of the best offenses and one of the best defenses. I think it just kind of falls on Lamar Jackson. He did not do well in the playoffs last year. The year before, he was a rookie, so it makes sense. But last year against the Titans were huge underdogs going into that game, and it didn't seem like he could really get the offense moving. I know there was drops and such, but as an MVP, you kind of have to force your team to get going. Next up, we will move. I would put Buffalo. I know it's a strange pick, but I feel really strong about the Bills this year. Josh Allen has question marks. I know his stats are comparable to Mitch Trubisky's at the start of his career. I don't think he'll have nearly as much as a drop off as Mitch did, and that defense is top notch. And then they've given Josh Allen all the weapons he needs to succeed. I see them minimum 11 games probably winning. I think they're going to be one of the teams to beat this season. The Saints are a toss-up in my opinion for a Super Bowl contender. I really think Drew Brees is obviously one of the best quarterbacks of all time, but they don't ever seem to show up in the playoffs. But I'll do Super Bowl contenders. I think they're probably the worst out of the four or out of the five, but kind of depends on if they show up to the playoffs for the first time in what feels like forever. Another team that could be up there for Super Bowl contenders to me is the Green Bay Packers, but I think they're just one level down. I think they're going to have a drop off from last season. Now they're going to have a harder schedule, but I will still put them in playoff caliber teams. Aaron Rodgers is one of the most talented quarterbacks in NFL history. Super talented dude. And that defense was great last year, which is one of the things that Aaron Rodgers has been lacking a lot of his career. The one thing that I would need to have seen to get them boosted to Super Bowl contenders already would have been drafting a receiver, picking up a receiver. The one that they did get was Devin Funchess, who opted out due to COVID. I don't know if he would have had that much of an impact regardless, but without the receiving weapons and just Devontae Adams, I don't think they're very strong at tight end either. Aaron Rodgers is going to have to do a lot to get them into the playoffs. I still see them making the playoffs, especially with the extra playoff spot now, but I think they'll be fine. I'm going to put the Titans on playoff caliber. Last year, I know it was kind of like an underdog to even make it as far as they did, but they surprised me, and I think A.J. Brown's going to do a lot better this year. I think Corey Davis, I know it's been talked about him being a breakout candidate for like years now, but I think this is going to be the year finally. A kind of a shocker, I guess. Denver Broncos. I think the Broncos, that defense, if I'm predicting right now, I'd say the Broncos honestly are going to surprise people and have the number one defense in the league. They got Jarrell Casey for like a 6th round pick, which is insane to me. I think he's still one of the best defensive players in football on the defensive line. Drew Lock I'm not as high on him as a lot of people were last year, but I think that he is capable with that defense and with the receiving options he has, especially now they got Jerry Jeudy as well. They have great tight ends. They have Cortland Sutton on the other side. And then at running back, they have the best 1-2 punch in the league. I think that the Broncos will be very, very good next year. The Cowboys, I don't trust Dak, but I will put them in playoff caliber. They have a great defense, one of the best running backs in football. I think I'd probably put Zeke at like 2 or 3 in my opinion, probably 3. But Dak has enough weapons that can kind of carry him to the playoffs. I don't think they're going to win a Super Bowl with Dak, but I think they have enough talent to get to the playoffs at least. Trying to think. The Colts, I would probably put them more on the bubble. The Seahawks, I would say, are a playoff caliber team. I know they lost to Davion Clowney, and they don't really have another pass rusher to replace him, but Russell Wilson is kind of like in that Pat Mahomes mold. I don't think he's as good to carry a team to a Super Bowl contender by himself, but I think he is good enough to make them a playoff caliber team just from him being on the team. Kind of a shock here, but I'm going to go with Chicago as a playoff caliber team as well. I know they had a drop off last year. They went from 12-4 to 8-8, which is quite the drop off. But like if you look in depth onto the reasons why, they were number 3 in drops, so it wasn't all on Mitch. He wasn't great last year, but he wasn't as bad as some stats may seem. He had a lot of receiver drops. The run game was non-existent. Nagy wasn't calling the best plays. The defense had a lot of injuries with Trevathan missing games. Akeem Hicks missed, I think, 11 games, and he means a lot more to that team than you would think. That may be a little too high. I would flip between them on playoff caliber and on the bubble, but I'll go with playoff caliber here. On the bubble, I'll start with the Tampa Bay Bucks. I think Tom Brady had an awful season last year. His stats were comparable to, again, I'm going to bring up Mitch again. He just seemed off. I know they don't have the best receivers in New England, so that may have been a big reason why. But now he's going to Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Gronk, O.J. Howard. He's got basically all the options to throw to. I think he'll be fine. I think they need to work on the running back position, but I think that like that's on the bubble. They're going to be a toss-up. I could see them winning the division, but I'm not sure. It kind of depends on how Brady plays this season. The Eagles I'll put on the bubble. I would feel confident saying playoff caliber team, but they just seem to play terrible outside of their division, just like Dallas does. Dallas, I think, is a little bit better because their defense is better. The Eagles' receivers haven't been great recently, and I don't know if Carson Wentz is a good enough quarterback to carry with all that weaknesses. I think if the offense helps out a lot or plays a lot better than they did last year, I think it'll be completely fine and they will sneak into a playoff spot. The Falcons, I think, are on the bubble. I'm higher on the Falcons than most people. I think Matt Ryan is a top 10 quarterback for sure, probably even like top 7. Todd Gurley, I think he's obviously not as good as he was his almost like his MVP-esque season a few years back, but I think he's still, I would probably still say top 10 running back. I think last year a lot of people, like all the jokes and stuff about his knees not working. He didn't even have a bad season last year, and I think in the offense where it's not just completely reliant on him running it, I think he'll be fine, and I think the Falcons are a very scary offensive threat, and I don't see many teams being able to stop that. I will go with the Colts next, which the Colts I don't really like the pickup of Philip Rivers. I think Philip Rivers is like an all-time great, but he's getting up there in age. He hasn't played well for a few seasons. And Jacoby Brissett, I think, has the potential to be a not superstar, but a pretty great quarterback in the league. I the defense though is what kind of like puts me over the line from being mediocre. They have a really good defense. And then their offense with the running backs, Jonathan Taylor was like my number 2 running back, and he went way later than I thought he would. So I think if they can just rely on the run game, and then they have T.Y. Hilton obviously, then I think they can be a pretty solid team. The Texans I would put at mediocre, but I'll put them on the bubble. The reason I say mediocre, they're one of the most questionable teams. Like them, the Bucks and the Patriots could go literally anywhere. Deshaun Watson is a top quarterback, but my questions there is they get rid of Hopkins and replace him with Brandon Cooks, who gets injured quite often. I don't think he even was that great when he was on the Rams. Deshaun Watson already had to make so many plays himself last season, and while having the top receiver in football, taking that away from him, his receiving core is a lot weaker. They don't really have a great tight end. Their offensive line is atrocious. I think David Johnson, as much as I loved him in Arizona, I think his best years are definitely behind him. The defense has a lot of holes. Unless players step up, I don't see them making the playoffs. I see them as a mediocre team, but I'll put on the bubble because Deshaun Watson is one of those players that's talented enough to flip a team over the line. The Vikings, they lost a lot of players this offseason, and that's my big question mark. I do think they had one of the best drafts. Justin Jefferson was one of my favorite players by far, but their offensive line has holes. Kirk Cousins does not seem to be able to win in prime time, and they lose Everson Griffin. I'm pretty sure it's Linval Joseph who stepped out due to quarantine or to COVID, and those are 2 big holes on their defensive line, which is one of their strong points. So I see their defense taking a big step back. Their offense, yes, I think Justin Jefferson has the potential to be better than Stephon Diggs a couple of years down the line. Right now, for this season, I don't see him being a superstar right away, and so that's why I'm going to put them on the bubble, because I see them probably like 8-8, 9-7, just barely missing the playoffs, but I don't see them as a playoff team. The Steelers I can put on the bubble. That's another huge question mark. It basically relies on Ben Roethlisberger. I think Ben Roethlisberger is a good quarterback. He's kind of like a Philip Rivers, all-time great, but he hasn't had a good season the last few years. I know last year the Steelers had a ton of injury problems at quarterback. I think they could be a playoff team. It just a lot of it relies on the quarterback play, which Mike Tomlin with Duck Hodges was almost winning games against like the Bills and stuff. So I think they should be fine, but if they have the same amount of injury problems as they did like last year, then I can't see them making the playoffs. But I think my dark horse defensive player of the year candidate is going to be TJ Watt, and so I think that can carry them a little bit and carry them over the line. Also with Minka Fitzpatrick, that defense is quite good. For mediocre at best, I'm going to put the Rams, but that could change before the season. Jared Goff, I'm a lot higher on than most people. I think he's a great quarterback. He had a really bad year last year for his standards, but I think he can definitely pick it up. Once they get a new running back, I think they'll be fine. Cooper Kupp, I'm a lot higher on than most people. I think Cooper Kupp's one of the best receivers in football. He's highly underrated. He won me fantasy football league last year, so I'm kind of a little bit of bias there. But I think the Rams, they have a lot of talent. They just don't seem to mesh very well, is my concern. But if they get the team chemistry all settled, they know how to play together better. I think they can 100% be a playoff team. But I don't necessarily see that happening, so I'll go with mediocre for now. I will put the Browns at mediocre. I know they're the offseason champs like 3 years in a row, but my problem here is I love Baker Mayfield, but he just doesn't seem to fit well in that offense. I know last year, Freddie Kitchens, I hated that choice as head coach, but the team just is a lot like the Rams, where they just don't mesh with all the talent they have. They have one of the best receiving cores, but they don't seem to perform like it. They had put up good stats, but like I don't know what it is, but the Browns do not play well enough for the amount of talent they have. I think maybe their new coach can help that, but I have to see it before I move them anywhere higher on the list. I'll put the Lions at mediocre at best as well. I think they could shock, but they have a really tough division. The Packers, one of the borderline Super Bowl contenders. The Bears are a playoff team. The Vikings are possibly a playoff team. I think the Lions aren't by far like super far away from like the Vikings, but I think they are mostly the worst team in the division, and I don't see them making the playoffs. I think they are getting a lot of good pieces with Akuda. I loved that pick. Matt Stafford, I think, is severely underrated. Kenny Galladay, great receiver. And then TJ Hawkinson, I think rookie tight ends don't usually contribute right away, so I think he'll step into the position and he'll do great. So I say in a few years they'll be up there, but for now I'll put mediocre. I will put the Giants at mediocre. Daniel Jones, I think, is going to be good eventually. I think he'll just take a while. It's kind of like the same thing with Mitch, is where he wasn't like dominant in college, and so he needs a few years to like kind of like adjust. And he had a good rookie year, but my only concerns are like he's got okay weapons, nothing spectacular. Evan Ingram drops a lot of passes. I think if he can get that under control, he'll be fine. And the defense isn't great. I really like Jabril Peppers, but Jabril Peppers is a player that can change a defense. Again, like the Lions, I think that they can be good in a few years. I'll put the Patriots at mediocre at best. I'm a huge Cam Newton fan. Back when I was younger, he was like my favorite player in the league. But he's had so many injuries recently that I don't even know if Bill Belichick can fix that. He is not going to have a lot of receiving options. So they're a big question mark. I don't really see them making the playoffs just because the Bills, I think, are going to win the division just flat out. And the Dolphins can sneak in and possibly win it over them. I think they're better than the Jets, but that's not exactly saying much. So we'll put the Dolphins, speaking of them, at rebuilding dash bottom dwellers. They are not a bottom dweller, in my opinion. They're just strictly rebuilding. I think Brian Flores is one of the best coaches in football. My only thing is last year they had one of the worst overall talent, one of the worst teams in the league, but just strictly on coaching, in my opinion, is what brought them to the amount of wins that they had. I think Flores can fix that. I am wearing a Tua jersey. I'm not a Dolphins fan. I just really like Tua, and I have a lot of jerseys, so I'm going to kind of switch to those throughout videos. I don't know if Tua's going to start right away. I do think he's going to start sometime throughout the season. I see them probably getting around the same amount of wins as last year, maybe a little bit more. Uh, I would not be that surprised to see them sneak into a playoff spot, though, just because I really think their coaching is incredible, and I think Tua is going to be a great quarterback. I think Burrow is a better college quarterback, and it's going to be better right away. But in like 2 or 3 years, I think Tua is going to be a top quarterback in the MVP conversation. I'm really high on him. I think he is fantastic. Um, and then I like some of the moves they made. I don't really like the Byron Jones. I think he's a solid corner, but paying him like the highest paid, I don't think he's that good necessarily. Um, but I just like the lack of talent they had last year and how good they did. I think that with even just these few pieces they've acquired this offseason, I think they will definitely improve. But I'm just going to put rebuilding for now because they, again, lack a lot of talent. Um, the Bengals, I think, are also rebuilding. I love Joe Burrow. I think that I don't think they're anywhere near a playoff spot right now, but I think Burrow is definitely going to help change the culture. Uh, I also think Zach Taylor's a good coach. They have AJ Green, Tyler Boyd. If they get a good tight end, I think they could definitely make some noise. Not early this year, but down the line, hence rebuilding. The Jaguars, um, I'd put them more towards bottom dwellers. Gardner Minshew, Minshew mania. I'm not too high on. I think he's okay. He's kind of a fill-in bridge quarterback. I don't see him doing anything too great, like ever in his career. And the management there just does not know how to keep players happy. Yannick Ngakoue, I don't know what the whole situation is, but obviously there's problems there when every player wants to leave. They trade all of their stars. It was not too long ago they were in the AFC Championship, and now they've traded away everyone and have Gardner Minshew as their honestly like their star on offense. Leonard Fournette had a very bad season, and I see him getting traded. I'd love to see him get traded to Tampa. I think that'd be a great fit. But Jaguars definitely a bottom dweller. The Chargers, I'll put them at mediocre. I don't think they're rebuilding nor a bottom dweller. Justin Herbert, I think, should start games towards the end of the season. Tyrod Taylor, a few years ago in Buffalo, I would have said like, oh, I think he'll be a good starter. But after his time in Cleveland, I'm not really sure. I just don't think he has the it factor. And with like Austin Eckler, severely underrated. They have a great receiving core, a great tight end, pretty solid defense. I just think it was their quarterback play, and they still haven't really fixed that because I don't think Justin Herbert's going to be great starting right now, like coming in. So I think they'll be mediocre. Once their quarterback develops, they'll be a playoff team. The Panthers, I think, are rebuilding, which is tough to do whenever you have an MVP caliber player on your team in Christian McCaffrey. But Teddy Bridgewater, I don't think is the answer. I think he is a bridge quarterback, and they don't really have an option other than him now. Uh, their receiving core is okay. Their offensive line's okay. Their defense is okay. They're a pretty average team, but I think a quarterback is what they need. I could see them. I don't see them making the playoffs at all, but I could see them kind of in the mediocre range as well. The Jets, I would put in bottom dwellers dash rebuilding because they. I think Adam Gase is not the answer. I think they need to fire him ASAP. I don't think he's a good coach. I think he's a good offensive coordinator, but he head coach in Miami, he failed. In New York, he's failed up to this point. Sam Darnold is a good young quarterback, and they're wasting away all of his development years with a bad coach, and that could ruin his entire career, which is something I do not want to see. Uh, and I think if they get rid of Adam Gase, I think they could be honestly improve really quickly if they get a good enough coach. Oakland, or I guess Las Vegas Raiders now. I don't know if I would put them in mediocre or rebuilding dash bottom dwellers. I'm going to put them in rebuilding bottom dwellers. I don't think Derek Carr is the answer here either. Ever since his leg injury, he's kind of dropped off and hasn't shown a it factor. They have given him better weapons than they did last year with Henry Ruggs, which I think was honestly the wrong pick. I think they should have went CD Lamb or Judy way before Henry Ruggs. Derek Carr doesn't have the best deep ball, and Henry Ruggs is a deep ball receiver. But I think Josh Jacobs, one of the best young running backs in football. The receiving core is okay. I think their defense has some pieces uh, with like Max Crosby, but I think again, it's kind of like a Panther situation where they need to get a new quarterback and they'll be a lot better of a team, but they don't have that right now, so I'll put them in rebuilding. The Redskins, I think, are rebuilding. Dash bottom dweller. Dwayne Haskins, I was really high on coming into the draft. He didn't really show a lot of flashes last year, and it's kind of a problem. From what I remember, he was supposed to be pretty like a pretty NFL ready quarterback as opposed to like a Daniel Jones, but he didn't really show any flashes. Terry McLaurin did good, but he didn't really have any weapons outside of that. I think with Chase Young, realizing it's not the Redskins anymore, it's the Washington football team. But anyways, Chase Young, I think, is going to be a defensive player of the year in a few years. I think he's going to be an all-time great. Like, he's got a hell of a lot of talent, but I think their offense is what lacks. Don't really have a running game. I think Adrian Peterson, all-time great, obviously, but he's definitely beyond his years. But I think if Dwayne Haskins develops, or if they get another quarterback who can develop, I think they can be a playoff team relatively soon, thanks to that defense. The Cardinals, again, a huge question mark team. But honestly, I'm going to put them in playoff caliber. I know a lot of people are like overhyping them and stuff, and maybe I'm doing the same. But I think Kyler Murray had a great season last year. He was Offensive Rookie of the Year. They have the debatably best receiver in football in DeAndre Hopkins. I think they have a decent running back, Kenyon Drake. I was really high on coming out of college. Even besides Hopkins, they have good receivers with Christian Kirk. And that defense isn't slacking either. I think that they're probably maybe more so on the bubble, but I'm not putting playoff team. And so, yeah, that's going to be my 32 teams tier list. If you have any debates, you can put it in the comments. I should be doing, now that the NBA playoffs are starting, all the teams are locked in because I just finished the Blazers Grizzlies play-in game. The Blazers did win. So I'm going to do kind of like a prediction of all the playoff games and eventual champion. And that should be in the next few days. I'm trying to get kind of like a better schedule on this. But for now, that's going to be it on the NFL tier list.